I hope to have Meng Foon, the Race Relations Commissioner, on the program this morning, but I don't know, Meng's been a bit odd. He says, yeah, I'll talk, then we text, and then he doesn't, and then he's, maybe he's busy. Maybe Meng Foon is too busy to talk about his double standard on Tusiata Avia, though I do note he has said publicly he doesn't particularly like the language she used in her poem and wouldn't have sort of written it himself, basically. I'd like more from Meng Foon, but he won't come on and talk to us. He might be busy today because today is the release of a film all about Meng Foon, the Race Relations Commissioner. It's just called Meng. This movie, and guess who paid for the movie about Meng Foon? You and me, to the tune of, through Te Mangai Paho and New Zealand On Air, $200,000. That's right. It's a bilingual documentary that'll be, I suppose, shared on the spin-off and stuff and Radio New Zealand and all the other woke outlets. And it's all about being Meng Foon. Geez, I'm looking forward to that. That'll be like Cocaine Bear, won't it, basically? So maybe that's why Meng's busy. There'll be a premiere today of the movie for our Race Relations Commissioner, who cannot say anything about race, it would seem, or anything meaningful about race. Meantime, we also wanted to hear from Tusiata Avia. I've got another poem of hers I've found that I'll read later. And Tusiata Avia won't come on with us, despite invitations, I think, to do so. But she did talk to the wokesters at Radio New Zealand last week. And in terms of, and if you listen to this program, you know the poem we're talking about, a poem that was funded, in fact, most of Tusiata's life's been funded by the taxpayer, a poem that talks about getting a knife and cruising central Christchurch and killing white men. It's quite specific, quite explicit, and she quite happily says, I'm there to outrage people. Let's hear what Tusiata Avia had to say to Radio New Zealand last week.
It's been put in my notes. There has been some controversy. Do you want to summarise that from your perspective, or not even summarise it, describe it, or how would you like to respond, even just to that statement? The ACT Party's David Seymour has accused you of racist hate speech.
I think, I came in here today with a poem in response to this hate-fueled and racist narrative that the ACT Party have made up, basically. But I have decided not to read it today because, what's happened, basically, is my poem and my show has been, it's been reduced down to a platform for the political right, and that is crap, and that's where the hate and the racism comes in. It's creating more fear and more intolerance in this country where we don't need that. It's pulling on the fears of people who have not been educated to know what colonisation even is. It's not even part of their experience. And so those fears have been, they've really been weaponised. This poem has been weaponised. And that is just to get oxygen, just to get a platform, just to get time to talk a lot of rubbish in election year, and, I really refuse to talk to, to take part in that ridiculous argument,
Tusiata Avia there talking to wokester Karen Hay on national radio. So suddenly the poem she wrote that was full of hatred and racism, it's okay. It's everyone else who criticises the poem who's hateful and racist, and it's all political. Well, wouldn't this be simpler? Wouldn't there be no controversy here, to be honest, if Meng Foon and the Human Rights Commission hadn't come out and said, we respect Tusiata Awe's right to free speech, but this poem is provocative. And okay, deliberately so. So why won't Meng Foon front? And is there a truth in all this? Well, to get some perspective, and we've had him on the show recently, and he's a good guy who I think sees things pretty well, we're joined by the former guy who kept an eye on race relations in New Zealand, Gregory Fortain. Greg, lovely to have you back. Thank you for joining us on the platform. You there, Greg?
Good morning, Sean. I'm starting to get worried that I'm going to lose my identity by now being anti-woke.
No, you're not anti-woke. You just call it like you see it. That's why we've got you on. Greg, what do you think of all... Carry on.
Also, just on Meng, when I was growing up, an illiterate old man said to me, you have the power to call out the good or the not so good in people. And so you take responsibility for that. And I think if you want to have a constructive discussion with Meng, then maybe you should extend a few olive branches.
Oh, I have been. I can assure you, Greg, I have been.
Yeah.
I had a beer with him. I had a beer with him on Waitangi weekend. He's been on the program since then, and it's been fine. But it would seem to me, more than 70 complaints to the Human Rights Commission about this poem, and Meng wouldn't say, or he's now issued a kind of, I don't think it's the greatest poem ever, or I wouldn't have used words like that. He's very reluctant and slow to do that, but in the context of this debate, the Mayor of Invercargill, Nobby Clark, uses the N-word, and Men is, within hours, saying that he should apologise or resign. It just seems a disproportionate response. And I'm sorry, not particularly an unbiased or impartial response, Greg.
Yeah. And look, I think it's important that we try to heal the wounds and we have transparent, robust, respectful discussions.
Yeah.
So having a view and then hiding doesn't help to bridge the gap. So let me start by saying that I am a passionate free speech person because it's personal. That I grew up in a colonized country where legislation reduced me to a lesser human being and determined where I could live, go to school, whatever I could do, and I was limited in what I could say. People were locked up for 90 days if they said anything against the government. So freedom of speech is one of the most precious commodities that we have. Of course, that must be balanced against accountability and responsibility for what I say. And so I think we should also sort out hate speech in this country in order to make sure that where it's detriment and harm to others, that there is consequences.
Yeah.
Of course, just because something is offensive, it is not illegal.
No, that's right. And I would agree. If she wants to write a poem that makes me uncomfortable, that's entirely her right. However, as has been pointed out by many people, if I wrote a poem about white men getting together with knives to stab brown women, I'm pretty sure someone would be going to the police and I'd be investigated.
Yep, and I think under the current hate speech laws, or it's not really called hate speech at the moment, the courts have said you have to come and demonstrate the detriment or the harm. and the courts have been very clear, don't come here and tell us it's offensive. So, for instance, if somebody uses an N-word, that's just offensive. But I have to demonstrate that's going to lead to harm.
Yeah.
But if we all want to live in this better society, then it's critical that we all consider what's best for my neighbor. And I think one of the problems is we all want freedom of speech for myself and people who think like me and speak like me and look like me, and I want hate speech invoked for everybody that disagrees with me. And I think hate speech, if I give you an example of hate speech, then the March 15 Terrorist Manifesto, which talks about...
Or Nutter with a Gun Manifesto.
Yeah, that's the gunman's manifesto, but it talks about the great replacement. And in there...
Well, I didn't know that. I'm not allowed to read it. How did you read it?
Yeah, so in the beginning it was available.
Oh, okay. All
until it got banned. Yeah. So, but they stole from Reno Camus's work, which was in 2018 in the US. You will not replace us. And if you recall the march on Charlottesville, which is we unite the right, Jews and Muslims and blacks.
We're digressing somewhat because my question was...
No, but I want to put... I want to give you the context of, for me, that's hate speech which leads to harm and detriment. And we have to differentiate between what is some angry poet saying something and what is hate speech.
Yeah. And I don't disagree with you. But do you see the tension and division that Meng's inconsistent approach to this has caused? Because he has jumped on Nobby Clark without any... Well, someone went and said to a newspaper they didn't like it. 60 or 70 complaints on Tusiata, and he won't even say anything meaningful.
Yep.
So do you see that there is now a perception that the Race Relations Commissioner believes that racism can only run one way?
Yep, which is unfortunate, Sean, because you will recall in fact, my good friend Tariana Turia condemned and criticized me for when I stood up for Paul Holmes and said it's just ludicrous that we think he should resign and lose his job.
Oh, that was the cheeky darky
comments.
Yeah.
Because those of us without sin, let's cast the first stone. And I didn't think that was worthy of one of the icons of the news media having to lose his job. So as race relations conciliator, then I said, what we need to look at is how do we bridge the gap? How do we get people together, being mindful that you're going to have extreme views on either side, and there will be offensive extreme views, but when those extreme views leads to harm and detriment, that's when the laws and the police and the government needs to act. And so I would definitely not read this poem to my children. I'm not talking about Tusiata's poem. But when you go and talk to the natives in Waikiki, they are very clear that the arrival of Cook saw the end and the overthrow of the Kingdom of Hawaii and the Aboriginal monarchy. So they don't have a lot of time.
No,
for James
and you can
Cook.
understand that in an historical context. Absolutely.
In the historical context, yeah. So again, I don't have a problem when they express how they felt about that. But if that leads to harm and detriment for descendants of Cook, then that becomes a serious problem.
And that's exactly what this poem specifically calls for.
I don't know what the intention is, but I haven't seen any brown women driving around now wanting to kill white men.
Okay, that's good. So I suppose you would say the same, Greg, as people who saying, I don't like, I'm uncomfortable with transgender people, I'm uncomfortable with drag queens. That doesn't cause any direct harm either. That's just an expression of opinion, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And again, this is my issue with freedom of speech and then accountability and hate speech, that Israel Folau or the Imam, they should both be allowed to quote out of the Bible or the Quran. And there's some horrendous things in the Bible and the Quran. But that's their right to believe that. And I don't see that as hate speech.
Okay. So do you think Meng's got this one? Do you think Meng's got this one wrong? He should have said something about the poem. He should have been more forthright rather than basically dodging and diving after, 60, 70 formal complaints.
Look, Meng's the person in the role right now, and it's not my place to want to criticise a current office holder. But again, my view at the time, and still is, that when we are not transparent, if we don't put sunlight on issues, we just let stuff fester and other people run the narrative. The role should be, how can I bring healing and unite the nation?
What do you think of Tusiata's comments there to Karen Hay on Red Radio that, everyone who doesn't like my poem is racist and they're using it for political ends? Surely she must have expected this when she wrote it. Surely she can't be sitting there cry-bullying, playing the victim on this now, given what she wrote.
Yeah, and that's, I totally agree that when you are a proponent, a champion of freedom of speech, you should also be prepared to take the robust rebuttals that come from people who disagree with you. But we should be able to have those respectful, robust discussions. But
we can't, Greg. We live in a world where people get cancelled if they disagree with the kind of liberal narrative, don't we? We've got people trying to ban the arrival of an anti-trans rights activist in the country. We had a guy called Richie Hardcore over the weekend who got banned from a UN women's event because they suddenly decided he wasn't politically correct enough. We don't live in an age where we can have these conversations without, it would seem to me more often than not, the left simply reaching for the cancel culture button.
Yeah, and this is where people like you and I, we need to work much harder in uniting and getting people together, because I don't like terms of left and right. I mean, I have positions on, I'm most probably very conservative fiscally, and on social cohesion, I'm very liberal, etc. But I think we just want to put people in boxes, and there shouldn't be these boxes. There's very easy...
Well, my problem, I think Tusiata wants to put me in a box, the sort of one you put under the ground, Greg.
I don't believe so, Sean. I don't believe so. You should have a beer with her and see if she wants to put you in a box, or if she's expressing what the people of Waikiki feels about.
Yeah, but she's not a person of Waikiki. She's a New Zealander. She's a Samoan.
No, but you can, as a poet, you can write about anything.
Oh, good. Good. Okay, well, I'm going to take that as a free hand to write more poetry.
Oh, provided it fits with both freedom of speech and hate speech, So if what you say, if what you incite causes harm, that breaches the law, Now, again, David Seymour, I expected a bit more from him as a free speech person. He should go and help with the current legislation then to make sure that it tightens up on...
Yeah. I think also...
the internet and the dark web.
Yeah, I think also there is great concern at the amount of public money spent on this poetry, Greg, and that's another issue completely separate from free speech or hate speech.
I think the public have a right to then express themselves at things called elections of how they want their public money spent, etc.
Hey, Greg, thank you for joining us and for that perspective. It's a pity that Meng Foon can't yet, but I live in hope. Have a great day. Thank you for your time.
Meng's a good man.
All right.
Meng's
I'm
a
not
good
disagreeing with you. It's his actions as a public servant that I'm concerned about. I thank you for your time. Look, I also want to share with you another poem that I've unearthed, published on the spin-off. It's called The City Fathers. It's by Tusiata Avia, and it mentions the guys who the avenues in Christchurch are named after: James Fitzgerald, William Morehouse, Samuel Bealey, and William Rolleston. And you're not going to believe this, but I'm going to read to you, please. Trigger warning. This could make you feel hateful or angry, but I'm sure we paid for it. We sit and stand above the 4 avenues named for us. We mark the centre of our city. You speak us into life every time you plan where to go. Listen closely. Our voices float up out of parks like smoke from Belsen. The streets whisper our genocide. Each avenue a forgotten land grab. Our voices are in the breath of each suburb and the prisons are full. Well done, Rolleston, old chap. You speak our names again and again. Morehouse, Bealey, Rolleston, Fitzgerald. This is how you tell each other where you are going and how we still preside over you. We stand on our plinths in the city and wait for the new murderers, the land thieves and the rapists. It's not long to wait in the scheme of things. Here comes the Christchurch shooter. If you can say our names as if they are names to be proud of, then surely we can say his. Build him a statue to join us. He is made in our image. Massacre and theft. It's what we built this country on. Let us remember our good friend George Grey, Governor of New Zealand, 1845 to 1868, the masochist of Waikato, a clever chap. He stole 3 million acres of land and then went to Africa to rape and pillage some more. If one day you replace us, then erect statues to modern-day murderers, 21st century thieves, latter-day white supremacists. Replace Queen Victoria with her granddaughter, Mrs. Windsor of the House of Slaughter, and Horatio Herbert Kitchener, the inventor of the concentration camp. Oh, we are a sterling group of men. We are fine, top-notch, first-grade, stellar bunch of men. Wow. She has got a chip. Well, she's got a shoulder. Well, basically, she's just a chip on a shoulder, isn't she? So it's like Nazi Germany. The 4 avenues in Christchurch rise like their voices and their statues are like smoke from Belsen. And funny that Tusiata, Order of the New Zealand of Merit, which is, of course, all based on, English titles and stuff, she has a crack at Queen Victoria. Isn't that amazing? Anyway, I just thought I'd share that with you. And could I urge you not to go and see Meng? It'll be online everywhere. The $200,000 documentary made by Te Mangai Paho and New Zealand On Air, all about a year in the life of Meng Foon. Nice work if you can get it. $200,000. There you go. That's where your tax dollars is being spent.